I have a workplace question. Most of us either work or are retired, so we can answer this question. Do you or did you stop for breaks and lunch? Now let me clarify. When I say stop, I mean that literally. Did you cease? End. I mean quit even works. While on break or lunch, were you off the job? You weren't thinking about the job. You weren't working on the job. You were on break or at lunch. How many of you took a real one, two? Yes, I want to see some hands here. You know, a lot of people either skip lunch, right? And I'm not criticizing you. I'm not. That's up to you. And some jobs allow you to eat while on the task, right? So I'm just wondering, how many of you really took a break when you were at work? And several of you did. And when it came time for lunch, you were not working, you were eating your lunch. I have a friend who owns a business. He can be intimidating. He is a deep-voiced, large, no-nonsense type of guy. I believe he stands 6 feet 7 inches. So he can be intimidating. He once saw one of his employees walking down the sidewalk and pulled over to talk to him. And the guy just pointed at his watch and kept going. You see, he was on break or lunch and he was not about to talk to the boss. And at first I thought, whoa, did you kill him? But no, I didn't have to think long because my friend agreed with him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even offended. In fact, he knew that he had to respect that man's free time. Now, in case you're wondering, my friend is a committed Christian, and I think that helps a whole lot because some bosses probably would get angry and be offended, but not my friend. I thought breaks and lunch were mandatory. I thought that, but they're not. Seriously. Did you know that? They're not. This is from the U.S. Department of Labor. Federal law does not require lunch or coffee breaks. However, when employers do offer short breaks, usually lasting about 5 to 20 minutes, federal law considers the breaks as compensable work hours. Meal periods, typically lasting at least 30 minutes, serve a different purpose than coffee or snack breaks, and thus are not work time and are not compensable. That's the law. That's from www.dol.gov, the Department of Labor. Federal law does not require lunch or coffee breaks. That was a surprise to me. I thought breaks and lunch were mandatory. Well, even though it's not the law, breaks are important. There must be a work-break balance. All work is not good, and all break is not good. There has to be a balance. But it's okay to take a break. Resting is godly. Have you ever thought of it that way? And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. Now, for God, the word means ceased. He stopped. But it's not just in Genesis chapter 2 that we learn about stopping and resting. There are other places like Mark chapter 6. Open your Bible to Mark chapter 6. We continue beholding the glory of the Lord in the Gospel of Mark. Jesus sent the 12, that is the apostles, throughout Israel to preach the kingdom of heaven and perform miracles. When they returned, they needed to rest. Mark 6, verse 30. Then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said to them, "Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." For there were many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they departed to a deserted place in the boat by themselves. This is the backdrop for the feeding of the 5,000. The 12, or the apostles, the disciples, they have been working. Ministry is work. After an extended period of ministry or work, they needed privacy and rest. And that was the intent, for them to go to the deserted place. They were to go there and find rest. There were so many coming and going, they couldn't even eat. But as we continue to read, we find that their lunch break, so to speak, or their break, was interrupted. The crowds were relentless. Let me pick up the reading at verse 33. But the multitude saw them departing, and many knew him and ran there on foot from all the cities. They arrived before them and came together to him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion for them, because they were like sheep not having a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. They were heading for a break, but the people ran ahead. They beat the disciples and Jesus to the deserted place, and they were there waiting for them. And there were thousands of people. I think it's good for us to try to put ourselves in this situation. The ministry was flourishing, and there was no way to hide Jesus. Now, he could have slipped through a crowd and went away, but that would have been by his divinity. Humanly speaking, people were watching him, following him, pressing to get close to him. They wanted Jesus. And so when they left for the deserted place, the people watched and guessed where they were going, and they ran ahead. They couldn't escape the crowds. According to verse 33, they came from all the cities. Can you imagine? There were thousands of people. In verse 44, it says, those who had eaten the loaves were about 5,000 men. Think of a crowd of 5,000 men. Now, Matthew says those who had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. When you add the women and children, how many were there? Well, the women and children could easily total another 10,000, right? If there were 5,000 women, 5,000 children. Now you've got a total of 15,000 people. One scholar estimated there were 20,000 people. Another estimated 25 to 30,000. There were thousands of people. Can you imagine a crowd of, let's say, 20,000 people in the deserted place? They want to be with Jesus. They want to hear Jesus. Thousands of them. And something extraordinary happens. Jesus sees all the people, all these faces, and he's moved with compassion. He really, really feels for them. I can tell you that compassion is a strong word. The Greek term refers to the insides of man. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean it literally, the kidneys, the heart, the liver, lungs, intestines. The noun is used 11 times. The verb is used 12 times. Of the 23 occurrences of this word, only one is literal. Most of the time, this word is a figure of speech. It refers to compassion, human feeling, concern. But what do the insides of man have to do with compassion? What link is there between compassion and the kidneys or the intestines? Well, the ancients believed that compassion comes from the inside, and they believed it literally. They believed that the organs were the source of compassion. And I think that they were right. Now just think about this. When you have ever been moved with compassion, when you've ever felt for someone or something, you feel it on the inside, don't you? You feel it first on the inside. You feel it in your gut before you show it outwardly. Compassion is a deep down feeling. It comes straight from the heart. And this is what happened to Jesus. He looked out at all the people and he was moved with compassion. He really felt for them. And I want you to know this morning that Jesus is not detached from the world, not at all. He is not detached from people. He's not detached from you. If anyone cares for you, he does. He is moved by perfect, divine compassion. He feels, and he feels everything in the right way. And he responds to the way he feels perfectly. I think that should be a comfort to all of us. Jesus cares for me. He cares for you. Well, Jesus saw the people as if they were sheep without a shepherd, and that's not a good thing. Sheep without a shepherd are vulnerable. They're in trouble. How are they going to eat? How are they going to find enough water? Who will protect them? Who will help them if they're injured or sick? Who will stand up for them? Who will lead them? Jesus saw this multitude as if they were a huge flock of sheep but there was no one to shepherd them. So he began to shepherd them. He began to teach them many things. That is a vital way that shepherding is done between people. So if you carry the illustration over, one of the main things pastors do is they teach. Well, back on this day, Jesus taught them many things. He also fed them. So let's pick up the reading at verse 35. When the day was now far spent, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and already the hour is late. Send them away, that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat." But he answered and said to them, "You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat?" But he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them to make them all sit down in groups on the green grass, so that they sat down in ranks, in hundreds and in 50s. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. So they all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of fragments and of the fish. Now those who had eaten the loaves were about 5,000 men. I want to go back to verse 42. And they all ate and were filled. If you were hearing that story for the first time, you might gasp at that point. Really? Whoa. Thousands and thousands of people ate and they were full? This is the only miracle recorded in all 4 of the Gospels, the only one. There's another miracle similar to it. It is not the same. It's the feeding of the 4,000. But this concept comes up repeatedly in Scripture. Suffice it to say, there's a lot more here than I will say today. When it got late, the disciples asked Jesus to send the multitude away for food. And that request opened the door for a special lesson. So this is a special lesson. Jesus said, now just think of this. He said, "You give them something to eat." Well, how much does it take to feed, let's say, 20,000 people? You feed them. According to John, this was a test. It was directed to Philip. So John 6:4-6 states, "Now the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was near. Then Jesus lifted his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, 'Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?' But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little." Now that's an important statement because it creates the actual dilemma for us. Even if Philip had 200 denarii, it wouldn't be enough to give them a little bit. More about that in a moment. Jesus tested Philip. What does that mean? What was Jesus doing? There are 2 types of tests in the Bible. One is a solicitation to evil. This type comes from either the devil or your sin nature. It should be called a temptation. The purpose is to cause sin. Temptations are always designed for evil. Well, that's obviously not the type of test Jesus gave Philip. There are two types. The other is an examination of the quality of one's faith. This type comes from God. It should be called a test. The purpose is to cause growth. The purpose is to make us better. Tests are always designed for good. So Jesus was testing Philip's faith. What would a passing response be? Now, we have an unfair advantage. We know what happened, so we know what should have been said. Philip should have said, I know that you are the good shepherd. You can feed the multitude miraculously. That's what he should have said. Here's what was actually said. Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? A denarius was a day's wage. 200 days is approximately 8 months. 8 months of earnings would not be enough to give these people a little bit to eat. There was no way. It was out of the disciples' hands, as it should be. Well, Jesus then told them to find out how many loaves were among the people. Now, why would he do that? Why would Jesus need to know how many loaves were among the people? I think it's probably because he wanted everyone to know that this was way beyond human resourcefulness. There was nothing. Among the thousands of people, there are only 5 loaves of bread and 2 small fish, and that's it. Nobody, essentially nobody, I guess the lad, he's ready to eat, but nobody else is. John described the fish as small. According to one scholar, the 2 small fish were the size of sardines served as relish when salted. Okay, so we basically have no food, Lord. What are we going to do now? So Jesus told the disciples, I want you to get the people ready. Have them sit down on the grass. Put them in groups of 50 and groups of 100. Get them situated for me. And they had to be thinking, why? What's going to happen? Jesus then took the bread and he looked up into heaven and he blessed the bread. That word, blessed, specifically means he gave thanks. He thanked the Father, God in heaven, for the bread. I'll just say that if you neglect to thank God, whether it's for your food or for everything else that he gives you, the opposite of thanks is ingratitude. And that's a serious matter. I was surprised to read this from a scholar. And he's talking about the fact that Jesus gave thanks. The Son of God is thanking God the Father. A refusal to do so is an act of insolence that results in falling away from the living God. I share that with you simply because you might get in a hurry at mealtime, or maybe you never thank God for what he gives you to eat. And I'm sharing that with you to encourage you to be like Christ and give thanks for the food that you eat. Jesus then, now this is remarkable, it's miraculous. He gave the bread and the fish to the disciples. The disciples in turn gave them to the people. Everybody ate. Everybody. And that's where the gasp comes. What? There were even leftovers. At the end of the meal, they had more food than what they had at the beginning. They had 12 baskets full of fragments of bread and fish. 12 baskets of bread and fish. Everybody ate. 20,000 people ate? Yeah. Well, what if it was 30? Doesn't matter. They all ate. They were all full. How? What happened? Did you notice that Jesus gave the bread and fish to the disciples? If we were reading the Gospel of John, the disciples are left out. It just says that Jesus gave. And that's important because the tense of the verb indicates that he gave continuously. He was giving bread and fish to thousands and thousands of people. Now, how did he do that? If I took the little piece of bread down here and I said, I'll tell you what, church, let's just have lunch in the sanctuary. Come on up, I'm going to give. Well, it's not going to work. But think about this. For Jesus, he could take as much as he wanted from these loaves that he had. He could take as much as he wanted to, and then reach back and take as much as he wanted to, and reach back, and he did that all the way to the last person. And the fact of the matter is, he created the bread as he gave it out to the disciples. He continued to create the bread. Now, this had happened in the Old Testament for 40 years. Remember Exodus 16, 40 years God provided bread from heaven. But there are miracles where flour and oil were created. 1 Kings 17, 2 Kings 4, bread is created. Well, here Jesus created bread. Why did he do it? Well, he was moved with compassion. They were hungry, and he met that need. But there's something way, way bigger, way beyond. You see, Jesus is not, well, he is concerned with your meal. I don't mean to say he's not, but in this setting, he's not just concerned with the supper on that night. Okay, that's a fact. Because on the next day, and this we find in John 6, and the next day he told the disciples, I am the bread of life. I am. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. I don't know if we experience that the way we ought to. I believe most of us have come to Christ. I believe most of us have received him as Savior, and we are born again, our sins are forgiven, we possess eternal life. I believe that. But I'm not sure all of us could say, I don't need anything. I am more than full. I am full beyond what I could ever expect. And I am getting everything from Christ on a moment-to-moment basis. I never hunger